Good evening, people of littleO.com, known as YouTube. 8:32 p.m. 5/26/2018. Happy Memorial Day from Pomme de Terre, Lake Area, Missouri. More precisely. We are gathered here this evening to get this little thing straightened out. If only in my mind, about rapists who have known heart problems and who are medicated for those problems and who have been hospitalized for those problems. Yet, even though on heart medicine, such as nitro, aka nitroglycerin, and others, which I don't happen to have the names of right here handy, because as you see, I'm working these things out in my mind, and the puzzle kind of helps me. You know what I'm saying? Maybe not everyone's that way, but I kind of am, and I kind of like it that way. So, I need to hear from those who possibly have been in that kind of situation or placed in that kind of situation where they were either accused falsely of rape while they are on known heart pills, more expressly BA. But see, before my husband took his heart problems up with the VA and stayed in the Harry S. Truman, whatever else it's called, the long form of the Columbia VA, he was hospitalized when our son was an infant. I forget how many days though. I know the VA was 10 days. That one's clear in my mind. But the one in 88, 89-ish, and I know my son was an infant. Okay? Because I did still have a driver's license at that point. And I had to load my son in his carrier into the car, and I went over there several times a day to the hospital. Okay, loaded him in the car, loaded him back out into the house, and it was kind of a lot of chore because John did a lot of that for me. He was always very helpful in that way. So, and also my uncle on my mom's side, Uncle John Bolton, was in ICU at the very same time. And see, even though I didn't grow up poor, when I got married, it was against my mother mainly. It was against mainly my mother's will that I married John, because he was quite a lot older than me. She actually begged me not to do it. But, you know how kids are. And I wasn't really a kid either. I was 23. So there I am, 23 years old. And I had kind of a wild childhood, or teenhood. And I had lost my rights to my mother, so that when we did get married, she had to sign me over like chattel, like a piece of property to John. And he reminded me of that a while later, that, yeah, don't you remember? It was like your mom signing over property to me. It was more like just a transfer of property. I was on so much meds anyway. Most of it was clear over my head. I'm like, oh, okay. What's on TV next, right? Get to the reality of it. Spit it out there, B, okay? So, Uncle John was in the hospital. They didn't know what was wrong with him. And Mom and Dad had to leave that very day because they had a state convention for the post office at Joplin. And Joplin, just prior to that, had some tornadoes. So they were in recovery down there from that. And the hospital called me. We lived at the projects. We lived at the projects as poor people because independently from my parents, I was a poor bird. I call them poor birds. I didn't have any money of my own. I hadn't earned any. I hadn't inherited any. I just was poor. And because Mom didn't want me to marry John in the first place, she was like the least helpful. I've said in another video, she didn't even want to loan me $1,000 for down payment on that house on South Washington. She says, this is just too much like crap. Y'all never do anything with it. I'm not helping this. But later, like I've told you before, and I assure you, we impressed her later, and she would come over regularly and hang out. She did hang some wallpaper over there. That was one of her favorite things to do of all times, to improve a place. And eat with us and just chill with us, and that just became our way of life, with my mom over there hanging around from like sometimes 10:30 in the morning till just after 3, when our last soap opera would end in the afternoon. Then she'd go home, do the stuff to get ready, for her meeting that night, or put dinner on for Dad, or, just regular house stuff, house lady stuff, housebrow. So, we lived at the projects. It was like prerequisite to getting a HUD loan. Okay? It was like the first night we're there, everybody's rioting right in front of our place. Okay? Had the cop cars out there. They nearly turned over a cop car. There was a blood stain under our bed and on the bedroom floor. But Bradley was little, and I had to back and forth with the heart problem. Now, see, I strayed again because that's just how I am. Unless I have it right in front of me, tickety, 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 tick, I'm going to stray off the topic. So, even if it's my freaking topic. The heart problem, John, and if you remember that same time frame, I had begged him, because both of my mom and him were prone, because they're older, to say, look, it's all in your head, which really hurt me. It hurt me deeply. You have no idea. And I was saying, this gal that comes over, she's sent from social services, some kind of home aid gal, home aid helper woman. She was supposed to, from what they said, how they described it, was to show me how to can food, preserve food, and that kind of thing. Well, as it turned out, she'd just stand over our son's crib and, tickle under his chin and laugh at him and just act stupid. Well, even I can just act stupid. Where's this thing they said she was going to teach me how to do my food, put food away for hard times or something, right? So, it's not like I don't know the ropes a little bit from human services. I know them. It's been a while, but I've been through them. I've jumped through those hoops. Okay? I said, please come home on lunch when she's going to be there. It was either I asked him to do it that way, to have lunch at home that day, or just switch lunch shifts with someone else there. I can't remember, but he did. He showed up just maybe 5 minutes and got a cup of coffee before she was visible out there in the parking lot. And it was a cool day, and the window was open there in the front. And so when we saw her close to the door, we just hollered out, "Come on in. The door's open." So she did. She walks into the door. Her name was Judy, but I don't remember her last name. But I didn't like her. She wore too much gold and diamonds to be going into the projects to, talk to poor people. And come off it. That's crazy. That doesn't say, hey, I relate to you. That says, hey, I lord over you. But anyway, she stood there in the door a moment. She wasn't expecting to see John, because I didn't mention that I was working on him to try to get him to be there when she got there. I thought he ought to see what he was calling all in my head with his own eyes, and maybe he would get it understood a little bit better. So she goes, after she sees him, and you can see her eye am up and down. I mean, she gave him the eye like you would not believe. And yeah, he was handsome. Well, he's still handsome. I mean, even though his hair is gray and long, but he was really in shape back then. And she's like, well, what do you want me to do, strip? Because we were both standing, when she walked in. And about that same time, if you remember correctly, they had sent me home because of the depression from the loss of the first son. I was very depressed. I had to be hospitalized for 30 days for my crack up, my meltdown, on chlorpromazine. And I'm not sure of the milligrams right now. I'm not sure of the size of the dosage. But I'm going to hazard a guess and say it was 50. Someone who was on it ought to tell me if that is totally berserk or in the range or what. Maybe it was 20. I just don't really remember. But I remember the night my son died, after I had just taken my chlorpromazine for that night. And it was a miracle that I could make myself get up and answer that alarm going off, respond to that alarm. But I had totally, the trauma of seeing my kid not breathing, it wiped out my knowledge of how to do CPR. And I had it through Red Cross swimming. I had it through Scouts. I had it through 4-H. I had it through health class at school. I had CPR those many times, but at that very moment, I couldn't do it. So I gently shook him, and he started crying. No shaken baby syndrome, of course. But then I started crying because happy tears. He didn't die, and hear him out of time again more later.